tale might be tall, but it's true. And I know it's true because it's from my Grandpa Jake, and he worked on Mount Mansfield, the true home of the Wampahoofus. Once, long ago, the Wampahoofus— now you must pronounce the plural of Wampahoofus as Wampahoofuses. Do not say Wampahoofi or Wampahoofusi unless you want to sound very silly. Lived in peace on the mountains of Vermont. They were shy little creatures and didn't bother people very much. Wampahoofuses had great big teeth, but they mostly used them for chomping blueberry bushes and straining the bushes through their teeth so that they could chomp multiple berries at once like a blueberry rake. They were the size of large rabbits or very small sheep. They had markings similar to cows, with some being spotted, some being brindled, and some being fawn-colored all over, and they always lived on the mountains. There are two kinds of Wampahoofuses, you know, the clockwise Wampahoofuses and the counterclockwise Wampahoofuses. The clockwise Wampahoofuses went around the mountain up and down in a clockwise direction, and the counterclockwise Wampahoofuses went around and up and down the mountain in a counterclockwise direction. And since they went around and around all their lives and all their years, they adapted to the mountains that they called their home. So that they could walk more easily in their steep mountainside home, the clockwise Wampahoofuses had their right legs shorten and their left legs gradually lengthen, and the counterclockwise Wampahoofuses had their left legs gradually shorten and their right legs gradually lengthen. As you might imagine, this made them look very silly indeed. But, silly as they might have looked to Flatlanders, the Wampahoofuses thrived on the mountains. The only problem was if you got them down onto the plains. For if a Wampahoofus that is adapted to hill walking gets caught out on the plains, all it can do is walk in circles endlessly because of the unevenness of its legs. Then, decades ago, maybe nearing on a century now, there was a huge hurricane here in Vermont, one that washed all of the sheep down the river. Now, hurricanes have very strong winds, and we don't have hurricanes very often here in Vermont, so the Wampahoofuses were not ready for it at all. The strong winds and the strong rain washed all the Wampahoofuses down the mountain, ass over tea kettle, into the valleys and plains. This was a great tragedy for the Wampahoofuses, and they were sorely confused. When the wind and the rain finally calmed, they were so mixed up that once they stopped running in circles down on the plains and tried to get back up the mountain, they had much difficulty. You see, the clockwise Wampahoofuses tried to go up the mountain counterclockwise, and the counterclockwise Wampahoofuses tried to go up the mountain clockwise. And of course, they couldn't do it. They were so well adapted to the ruts they'd been in all their lives that they just kept falling back down the mountain. The cries they sent up were horrible to hear. They just wanted to get back to their mountainside blueberries and their mountainside homes. Eventually, most of the Wampahoofuses gave up. Some sadly perished, while others learned to lean on each other, one clockwise and one counterclockwise, and so staggered together across the flat land. This unstable team formation, though, only worked on the flat land, and they couldn't get back up the mountains, so they headed away from the mountains that they loved. I'm told some of them made it as far as the west, but at least one Wampahoofus survived and managed to make it back up onto Mount Mansfield. We don't know if she was a clockwise or a counterclockwise Wampahoofus. This lonely Wampahoofus had as much food, as many blueberries, as it could want, because there were no other Wampahoofuses competing for dinner, and so the Wampahoofus thrived. As the years passed, more and more people went hiking on the mountain where the Wampahoofus lived, but they did not see her, for as I have said, Wampahoofuses are quite shy creatures. The Wampahoofus liked the company, but began to grow irritated when she noticed that some of the hikers didn't leave the mountain as pretty as they found it. The Wampahoofus watched as passing hikers would take candy bar wrappers and throw them right down onto the ground, or worse, smoke cigarettes and leave the still smoldering ends around everywhere. The plastic candy wrappers would get in the Wampahoofus's teeth as she tried to strain the blueberries, but these careless hikers could have set her home on fire. Days, weeks, months, years passed, and the bitterness of the Wampahoofus grew and competed with her shy nature. She tried to pick up the litter as best she could, but there were just too many hikers and only one Wampahoofus going round and around the mountain in only one direction. And she certainly wasn't built to follow the paths of the hikers, which went straight up the mountain instead of sensibly around the sides. One day, the Wampahoofus was watching some hikers that were being rowdy, and sure enough, one of them took his candy bar wrapper and dropped it right on the ground. This was the last straw. The Wampahoofus opened her jaws wide, ready to chomp the thoughtless hiker. But just then, an icy blast of wind all the way from Canada swooshed down and froze the Wampahoofus mid-chomp. The hiker didn't see the Wampahoofus, but heard a snarling sound in the wind and was frightened. He picked up his candy bar wrapper, and the party of hikers left the mountain. Now, the Wampahoofus was frozen clean through. That Canadian blast of wind had been so cold and froze her so solid that she petrified into stone, forever frozen in rage with her mouth open to chomp the hiker. If you go up the Wampahoofus Trail on Mount Mansfield, you can see the stone that used to be the majestic Wampahoofus, each tooth looking sharp, but worn with age. But you might be wrong if you think that was the last of the Wampahoofuses. Wampahoofuses are so shy and nimble that they escape notice completely more often than not. And to this day, hikers camping out on the mountain hear strange snarling noises in the wind and strange snuffling noises in the bushes. And often the hikers that go missing are those hikers who had littered or harmed the mountain in some way. So don't get attacked by a Wampahoofus. Keep our mountains beautiful.